Hi there. In the last lesson, I introduced you to the concept of single row functions. Single row functions are exactly what they sound like. They operate on a single row at a time. And for each row as the input, the function returns a single value of output. And I've shown you how you can call these functions as part of the select clause to modify the result that gets printed in the report grid. For example, we used the concat function to combine the values contained in cells with words and characters or statements and display them in the grid in sort of a combined, clubbed together manner. This concat function call was part of the select clause. We also learned about the upper and lower functions, that uppercase and lowercase English words to be displayed in the grid. And those also were included as part of the select clause. In this lesson, as well as the next one, we'll continue to go over several other handy single row functions you can use to write more complex queries. But before that, I want to share some more important details regarding single row functions. These functions can not only be used in the select clause, you can also use single row functions in filtering conditions of the where clause. Okay, remember the where clause was used to filter at the record level, right? Any record that matches the where condition would qualify to be returned in the data grid, right? And since single row functions operate on a single row at a time, you can naturally use these functions as part of the where clause, right? Not just the select statement. You can use them as part of the where clause as well. And what would you use them for? Well, to filter, right? That's what the where clause is all about. So let me show you an example of using single row functions in the where clause. Let's sign in here. I'm on the apex.oracle.com website. Click on sign in as we've been doing and go to SQL Workshop and SQL commands. And let's just do a quick select statement, select star from emp, and hit the run button just so that we have the data in front of us. Now, I want to write another query that actually uses a single row function as part of the where clause. Okay, you've already seen this. Select lower from, for example, ename, right, from the emp table. This statement right here is actually going to lowercase all of these e-names. Okay, so hit run, and notice that King, Blake, Clark, all of these are lowercased. Okay, and the name of the column by default, the name of the column, if we don't give it an alias, it just takes whatever was the function call, and it throws that as a column name. So we can actually also use these types of functions in the where clause. Let's get back to looking at the employee table. And I'm going to write a query, and I want you to take a guess as to what you expect this query to return. Okay, select star from emp where job is equal to lower, and I'll just do this manager. Okay, so highlight this query, and when I hit run, notice what gets printed out. Okay, before I hit run, I want you to take a guess as to what is going to get returned here. Now let me hit run and notice that nothing, no data found. And the reason for that is we're saying, give me all of the employees where the job column contains the data that's equal to this, to lower manager, right? The lowercase word manager. And that, of course, is not, the job column only contains capital words, right? Highlight this statement above, hit run again, and notice that, the job column only contains capital words here. So when we're doing job is equal to lower manager, this, of course, none of the records qualify, and that's why this query actually doesn't return anything. Now, if I change this to uppercase, like that, and highlight this, it's actually going to run just fine, right? Now this is not doing anything. I don't even need upper here because all of these words are already capitalized. But if I was to, for example, in this quotes, mention the word manager in lowercase like that, highlight this and hit run, and notice that these still are qualifying, okay, because we're uppercasing whatever's in here, and that's the thing that's being checked with the job column, okay? And only the rows that qualify for this statement, those are the only ones that are being returned. So you can use various functions, single row functions. You can use them as part of the where clause as well, okay? Not just the select statement. So now that you know you can use single row functions as part of not only the select clause for displaying the results, but also as part of the where clause for filtering the number of rows returned, I want to add to your arsenal a list of functions you can use, right? Some more functions that are useful for writing more complex SQL queries. You've already seen upper, lower, and concat functions, and these fall in the category of character-based functions because, guess what? When you're concatenating words in English sentences together, or you're uppercasing or lowercasing words, you're operating with characters. That's why they're referred to as single row character functions. But there are other categories of functions we'll see in this lesson as well as some of the other lessons that are coming up. And those categories are, for example, numeric functions, okay? Functions that work on numbers. Null functions, functions that work on columns that contain no data, right? Those are referred to as null functions, N-U-L-L. We've seen this before. And date functions, okay? That's another category. And these are all different categories of single row functions we'll be covering. So let's get started. This next function I want to go over is called initCap, okay? And this function capitalizes the initial character of each word. So it does exactly what it sounds like, initCap. So let me get rid of all of these statements here and just do a select, and I can do initCap. And as the argument to this, it's just going to take a particular character sequence. So I can say, hello, my name is Imtiaz, okay? And just close the parenthesis there, and I can do from dual. If you remember from the previous lesson, we don't need to select from a particular table. We could just select from dual, which contains just a single column and a single row, and it's used for testing. So let's test this function out. I'm going to highlight this and hit run. And notice that it does exactly what it sounds like. initCap capitalizes the initial letter of every word in the character sequence, okay? And notice the column name here is pretty hairy, so we can change that to as a sentence or something like that, okay? Highlight that and hit run. Now the next function I want to look at is called the length function. And this function returns the number of characters in a given character sequence. Let's change this initCap to L-E-N, well, let's put a space there, L-E-N-G-T-H, okay? And I'm going to change this to L-E-N-G-T-H. From dual. So basically it's going to give me the number of characters that is in this sequence, right? This string. This is also referred to as a string when it's surrounded by these single quotes. Okay, so highlight this and hit run, and notice that it prints the number 23. And if you count, every character, including the spaces, qualifies in this character sequence. So it basically gives us the length, the number of characters in this entire sequence. I'm calling these functions on literal strings like this, right? These sentences that I've made up. But you can of course call these on the columns as well. So I could do ename, right, from the emp table, and this works as it should, right? It's giving me the length of every single ename in the employee table, okay? 10 rows are returned because I'm only supposed to show 10 rows here. Let me make that 20 so we see all of the data, and notice that this will return. Well, let's highlight this and hit run. And notice that we get all 14 rows, and the length of every single ename is being shown here. So just to prove, we could do ename as the first column, and the second column is going to be this thing right here. So highlight this and hit run, and notice that it's giving me the ename first, right, king, and then it's printing out the number of characters in this word king, the number of characters in Blake, Clark, Jones, and so on. Okay, you can count these up for yourself, it'll match. And again, I can use this function in the where clause. Okay, so I could do let me copy this here, where length of ename is equal to the number 6. So it will only return, this query should only return those employees that have a name of 6 characters. All right, so highlight that, hit run, and notice that Martin, Turner, and Miller, all 3 of these guys have 6 characters in their name. Now finally, the last function for this lesson is the substring function, and it's written as sub-str. And this function is used to extract parts of a string. The substring function has 3 arguments. The character string, it could be a word, it could be a sentence, it could be a column, which is, the first argument. The second argument is the starting position, which is indicated by a number, okay? The starting position of where we want to begin the extraction. And the third argument is for stating the number of characters that we want to extract. So let me show you an example. Select sub-str, and the argument, I'm just going to write hello. It needs another argument. We need the starting position. So let's, for the sake of things, I'm just going to put a 2 there. So it's going to start the extraction from the second character right here. And how many characters do I want extracted? That's the third argument. How many characters to extract? And let's just put 2 there as well from dual. Okay. So highlight this and hit run. And notice that EL is the only characters that are extracted. Now I can also do this just so that you can see for comparison. I can put this hello string as the first column and then the number of characters so you can see side by side. Hit run and notice that EL, these are the only 2 characters that were extracted using the substring method. Okay, so the first argument is the actual string, the character sequence that we want to extract from. The second argument right here is the starting position. Where do we want to start extraction from? And the third argument is how many characters do we want extracted? Okay, so if I leave this out, if I leave the third argument out and highlight this and hit run, it's going to basically extract all the way to the end of this sequence. Okay, so it starts the extraction from the second character all the way up to the end of the character, whatever it is. So I can have a bunch of other gibberish here and highlight this and hit run. It will start the extraction at the second character and go all the way up to the end, right? Let me show you another example with the substring function. And I wanted to start extraction from the 10th character in this statement, hello, my name is. So hit run and notice that it starts from name is, and you can count that and it should match. So let's say we want to only extract 5 characters. So then I would put the number 5 here after the starting point, the starting position. So it starts from 10 and it starts extracting 5 characters from there. So highlight that and hit run, and it should include name and space. Okay. Now, if you recall, you can actually call functions within functions. So I can actually do a length here, length, right? And this will basically give me the length of this extraction. So highlight this and hit run, and notice that it extracts 5 characters. So what is the argument to the length function? Well, it only has a single argument. The length function accepts one argument, and that is a string literal, right? A sequence of characters. And what does substring function return? Well, it returns us an extracted set of characters, right? So we can safely put the result of substring into length. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So the substring function gets evaluated first. Those letters get extracted out, right? And those letters are then basically fed into, as input to the length function. And that's why length is basically counting them up and returning that. That's 5. Now, the next function I want to go over is called the lpad function. And it's used to add characters to the left of a given string, right, to the left side. So it basically creates sort of a padding of extra characters to the left of any word or character sequence. And the first argument to this function will be the character sequence or string that we want padded. The second argument is going to be taking a number which represents a total width of the string after the padding is added. And the third argument will be the actual character we want to be used to pad the string on the left. Okay, so if the third argument is omitted, it'll just add extra spaces to the beginning of the string to meet the width of the string. So let me show you an example. Let's do select, and I'll do lpad. And the first argument, what is the first argument? It's the character sequence that we want padded. So, any given string like this, I use the word hello. The second argument is the entire width of what I intend this data to have, right? The entire width, the length of this data. So let's just say 10 characters long. And then finally, the actual padding, the character that we're going to use for padding is the third argument. I'm just going to use, for example, the percent sign, or let me use something else. You've already seen the percent sign. Let me just use the ampersand sign from dual, right? We're testing this out. We can use a dual table just as a single column and a single row. Highlight this and hit run. And notice that this is our word hello, and it adds padding to the left. And the entire number of the width of this data is 10. Okay, you can actually count that up. So this function pads to the left this given character so that the entire length of the string equals 10. Now if I make this, for example, 100, highlight this and hit run, this is of course going to add a lot of ampersands. We're padding this string way too much until this equals 100 characters length. And you can count these up. This is actually going to be 100 characters. Now, as you might guess, if there's an L pad, left pad, there must be a right pad as well, R pad. And this does exactly the same thing, but actually adds these characters to the right of the word hello. So run that and notice that hello is in the beginning, and then we're padding all of these characters on the right. Okay. Now, just like how we have R pad and L pad for padding on extra characters on either the left or the right, we have similar functions for trimming extra characters from the left or the right. And that is called ltrim and rtrim. And those basically get rid of extra characters. So if I do an ltrim, I would change this function call to ltrim, and it only has 2 arguments. The first argument is the data that we want trimmed, and the second argument is the character that we want to trim. So I put an H there. This is ltrim. This is going to trim from the left this particular character H. Highlight this and hit run, and notice that we're just left with ELLO. Okay. Now, if I have some H's here to the right of this word, this trimming is not going to take care of the right. It only takes care of the left because this is ltrim, left trim. It takes care of the first H. I can have multiple H's in the beginning. They will all be trimmed, and all we will be left with is the ELLOH and anything that follows. Okay. To get rid of the H's at the end here, I can change this to R trim, and highlight that, hit run, and notice that it's getting rid of all of these extra H's because we're doing an R trim. Now, there are several other functions you can learn about if you're interested. You can go to this site called techonthenet.com and go to the Oracle PL SQL section, and you'll see a section for functions by categories. We're going to be covering plenty of these, but not all of them because not all of them are important. But if you want to get ahead, feel free to check this site out. I think it's a great resource. So let's wrap it up here. I'll see you in the next lesson.